Hi guys, this is Nadia from Embellish Crafts, and today I want to show you how to make this copper cuff bracelet with a pattern core. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button because I upload new stuff on a regular basis. I quite often make kits and PDF tutorials for the videos I put up on here, and I'll pop a link in the description below. I also have all sorts of gemstones, square and half round wire, some beads, and all sorts of other goodies on my website. So take a gander over and see if there's anything you fancy. Last but not least, come and join us in our wire wrappers and metalsmiths group on Facebook. I'll also pop a link below. Right, let's get started. Right, so this pattern takes a little bit of practice to get the symmetry right. I start off by leaving 10 centimeters or about 8 centimeters roughly, I don't know what that is in inches, to the one side, and I make my first 90-degree bend. And then I'm using a pair of flat nose pliers. I use these because they have, the tip has the same sort of shape, and I use that as a marker to get the shape right. So as you can see, I'm bending the wire over the tip, and I use the pliers to very gently squeeze the wires together. You can use your fingers to hold your wires in place and just do it really slowly, and you can compress the wire quite nicely like that to make sure that it's nice and flat. And then I sort of adjust it to make sure that everything is perpendicular in a 90-degree angle. So once I have the wire folded over like that, I use the tip of my flat nose pliers again as a sort of size marker, and I bend the wire back up and around itself. And once again, I then flatten the wire very gently. The slower you go, the more control you have over everything. So I just tend to gently maneuver it, and then once I find the right spot where I feel the wires won't slip, I squeeze. This takes a little bit of practice, and I keep adjusting the pattern itself just to make sure that it's nice and flat when I squeeze the wires together. And that is the first one. And I always make sure that the wire runs run parallel to each other and at a perpendicular angle as well, so that everything is symmetrical. And I squeeze and adjust until I'm satisfied with the actual shape. Next step is to bring the wire upwards or downwards depending which direction you work in, and I then adjust it until I have a big enough gap to slip in a fine nosed pair of pliers. These are chain nose pliers after that. So you can see what it looks like so far, and this is the pattern to begin with. So next, as I said, I've got a fine tipped pair of chain nose pliers, and I slide the tip of that in, and I make sure that when I put the bend in the wire to go straight again, that the straight section of wire lines up with the bottom of the first pattern we have created, like that, and this will ensure that it's symmetrical. Next, I bring in my flat nose pliers again and use the tip of those pliers to gauge the size. So I'm going to fold it over, and this is a little bit tricky at this stage, but with practice that will come. So once I've bent it over, I am again squeezing the wire downwards. So just make sure first of all that they're obviously lined up, and then once I've done that, I am folding. I'm using the bend at the bottom to kind of gauge how long the second fold will be, if that makes sense. Place my pliers, use it as a marker, and I squeeze as I go. And I'm using the fold to kind of gauge how big the second fold will be. And then once I'm satisfied, I will fold it over the tip of the pliers and squeeze down once again. Now obviously the bend will add or take away some of the length, so you need to practice a little bit and get a feel of how much the bend will change the shape, and that really is the only thing that will kind of mess with your sizing, if that makes any sense. So practice that a bit, and then it will come right. And then before I move on to the next step, I just make sure that I straighten out the wire and then fold it downwards. And that is the whole pattern, so you just need to keep repeating that, and that's what it should look like. So once I'm happy, trust me, this took a little bit of swearing as well when I first started doing it, but once you get it down, it's much easier to do. So the next step is to bring the wire towards the middle, because obviously this is going to be a core piece. So we're going to bring the wire down, but instead of putting a bend at the bottom, I'm putting one in the middle, like so, so that it's central, and that's what it should look like so far. So we're going to be using this later to create the loop for the bracelet attachments. Right, next is to create the woven section. So we need 2 equal parts on either side of the bracelet. So the 6 wires we have, we split into 3, and I'm starting with my first wire, and I'm leaving about 30 centimeters of weaving wire to the left and about 3 to 5 centimeters of the base wire. That all depends on how long your bracelet is. So it just depends. Obviously, the bigger your bracelet, you need to make sure you've got enough space. So I'm looping it around the first wire, and then I'm bringing in the second wire, and I'm wrapping this weaving wire around both wires twice before bringing it in and wrapping my weaving wire around the first wire twice, like so. You can see the little inset on the left here, which will show you the pattern. And I always make sure that I pause and push the weave together. Not everybody does this, but I like doing it because it enables me to create a neat sort of pattern. That's just me. Everybody does it differently. So once I've brought the third wire in, I'm sliding the weave wire around all 3 wires before bringing in the weaving wire between wire 2 and 3, and wrapping it once around the top wire, and then once again around all 3 before coming back down and wrapping it twice around the base. The inset shows 3, but it's actually just 2. I don't know why I've got that showing there like that. So it's just twice around the base wire, and then we're going to repeat the pattern. There will be more detail on the pattern in the next step, so you can see what it actually looks like. Then we're just going to repeat this. So we're going to have 2 wraps around 2 wires and 1 wrap around the top wire, like so. I'm going to zoom this in. So that's what it looks like so far. And then we're just going to create the same again at the bottom. So we've got a top and a bottom section. So obviously when you're weaving at the bottom, you need to make sure that you are weaving upside down, because obviously with a pattern at the top, there will be a back to the weave. So you need to make sure that when you're doing the bottom section, you're weaving from top to bottom rather than the bottom to top when you're doing the first section. I hope that makes sense. A little bit complicated, but if you do look at the inset in the next step, you'll understand what I'm doing a bit better. So I'm looping around the top, and if the wire tends to bend out of shape, just make sure you straighten it out again. Square wire has a tendency to want to twist and then look a bit ugly, so round wire works also for this if you don't have the square, so it's not a necessity to use that, so you can use that. So both of these should look the same. So you've got one top section and one bottom section. So for now we're going to shift away the bottom section, and we're just going to work with the top, and I'm sliding in the pattern we created earlier. And here I actually realize I have put it upside down. It really should be the other way around, but doesn't really matter in this instance. So but if you want it the other way around, just flip it. So what I'm doing here is I'm just using the weaving wire, and I am attaching the middle section to the top weave with 2 wraps. And you won't always I try and keep the weaving pattern at the top equal in between each attachment. It's not always possible, because obviously it depends on how tight you weave. So attach it whenever you reach a bridging point in the central pattern. So what I'm doing here is there's not enough space to attach the top and the bottom at the same time, so I'm doing one alternatively, but I'll explain that again in the next step. So you can see here what the weave actually looks like on the top left here. So I'm just attaching the first section here, and then I'm continuing with that weave until I reach the second, not the second, I'm going to skip one with the top, and I'm going to attach the bottom one where I've skipped with the first one. Hope that makes sense. Right, so I'm going now to bring in the bottom section. So I've created enough of a weave to move on to the section that is free, where we haven't attached any weave to the central pattern. So now I'm using the weaving wire from the bottom to wrap around the core pattern, and as I said, I'm going to skip one, and I'm attaching the bottom component to the central component by skipping one of the sections, just because there isn't enough space for one wire from the top and one wire from the bottom to attach. If you make the pattern bigger than I have, then you will have more space, obviously, and then you could possibly attach from the top and the bottom. So it just depends on how big you make the core sections. So spacing this out, and then once you have attached the core section to the bottom section, we are just going to continue with the weave as we did before, and obviously you need to remember to skip one. So the next one being attached to the core will be the top section. So I'm just going to continue with the weave until I have skipped one and then attach. Right, so that's what it looks like. So you can see here I've skipped one over, and I am stopping at the next section that doesn't have an attachment yet, and I'm going to attach my weaving wire there and then skip with the bottom. So that's what it looks like so far. So I've attached, you can see alternating, I think is the word, where I've skipped one from the top and then one from the bottom, one from the top and one from the bottom, and you just keep weaving until you have reached the end. So obviously you will have two sets of weaving wire and your wires coming from the top. So I'm going at this instance, take the bottom weaving wire and wrap it around the core component twice before moving over to the top component, and I'm using its weaving wire to attach to the middle component twice again. And this is just so that it's attached from both sides. And then I'm going to continue with the weave on each side. So I'm going to use a bead to compress that weave a little bit. So this is a 3mm copper bead. So if you buy these beads from me, or if you buy a kit from me, you'll need to make the hole a little bit bigger because it doesn't exactly fit onto 1mm wire, but it can easily be done with a file, like a needle file like that. The hole can be made bigger easily. So you can see here the weave is extended just enough on each side to accommodate 4 beads. So the next step is to take the weaving wire from the top, and all I'm going to do is wrap this weaving wire once around each individual wire, including the core, just to create like a bridge. You can see on the inset what I've been doing. So I'm going to make my way all the way to the bottom, wrapping around each wire once individually. I'm going to ignore the bottom wire completely. Make my way down, and on our way back up, I'm going to wrap around 2 wires at a time. So I'm pushing the weave together, and now I'm wrapping around 2 wires at a time and making my way back up to the top until you have secured all the wires. And what this does is create like a block weave, and that will hold all the wires in place, even the middle ones, and give it a little bit more stability. You'll see just now there's a little inset of when it's finished, what it looks like. And I repeat this step going down and up about 2 or 3 times, depending how long of a length you want this to be. And obviously push the weave together to make it steady or neater looking. That's what it looks like so far. And you just carry on with that. Okay, so I've done about 3 sets on each side, and now the wire is all secured. And the next step is to create the little detail with the square wire. Obviously we need to do away with that. That's what it looks like on one end. So I'm just using the 3 top wires to create the shape, and I'm just folding the wire inwards in a clockwise motion, and make sure that the sort of loop is quite small, because the wires on one side all need to fit on the bottom section without overlapping to the other side, because we'd like it to be symmetrical. Again, there's a little inset on the left here to give you an idea of what it looks like. Now this doesn't have to be exactly like that. You can make the shape look however you want, however many swirls you want. You can trim it off if you want to, as long as you have secured them in some manner so that it doesn't, the wires don't come undone. So bring in the third one, and I'm going to loop the third one in, and you can do this in whichever manner you want. You can do the pattern that I'm showing you here on the left, or you can create a single swirl and trim it off, or trim all the wires off if you don't want any decorations there. This is entirely up to you. So I'm just showing you here how I have done mine, and this is the innermost, which I will place sort of in between wire bead 2 and 3, and then I will place the other wires around it and shape them according to my liking, like I have done at the top here. So the next step is obviously, once you've done that, and to secure them. So you would cut some 0.3 mil wire, which is your 28 gauge, and which I haven't shown the step, I haven't shown it here, but you need to attach these swirls to the bracelet itself, because otherwise they would be bent out of shape if you get hooked on something. Right, so we need to create loops like this, and ideally I would have a little bit more length, which I have accommodated for. This is a little bit short, which caused a bit of complication for me to finish the loop, but the length I've given for you is a bit longer, so you shouldn't have this problem. So next I'm going to loop, let's make a small loop. This size depends on whatever you want it to look like. So I'm looping it around my bell making pliers, and then I am creating like a lollipop almost, and I'm using my bell making pliers to adjust the loop and then to create a wrap around the stem that we have created. So the stem should be just long enough to accommodate 2 wraps of the wire, and that would be a lot easier if I had more to hold on to. As I said, this is a little bit short. So you need to make it a little bit longer than this. And what this does, obviously the wire itself, the 1 mil, would be too weak to carry the weight of the bracelet over an extended period. So we want to strengthen it a little bit by doubling the wire up, by creating these loops. So I am wrapping it as much as I can. Ideally there would be 3 loops, and the wire that's left over would then be bent inwards and brought through the bracelet itself. I will show you in a minute what I'm talking about. Ideally this would come from the front to the back, or sorry, from the back to the front, so it doesn't poke anyone. But I'd only had enough length to feed it through from the front to the back. You can still tuck it away nicely so that it doesn't get stuck on clothing or scratch the skin when you're wearing it. So I'm just folding it over, and I am trying to pierce it through the weave so that it goes back towards the back and gives the hook area where we're going to add the findings a little bit more strength. And that's what it looks like on the other side, where I had enough wire to do 3 wraps and feed the wire from the back to the front, as you can see here. So that's that looks much better. And then obviously make sure you cut it so it doesn't get stuck, and that's what it looks like so far. The last step is to shape the wire or the bracelet itself, and it should be quite easy because this is quite thin wire really for a bracelet, so it's easy to shape it. And that's why it can't be a cuff without a chain, because it would be too flimsy and, you know, bent out of shape. So we're going to be attaching some chains to it. And that's it. That's the whole bracelet done. So I would absolutely love it if you could come and visit me on my social media. I've got Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I would absolutely love it if you would come and join our artist group on Facebook, which is called Wire Wrappers and Metalsmiths Worldwide. We're a fun bunch and do all sorts of challenges, and it's a great group to interact with other artists if you enjoy that sort of thing. Also, as I said, I do kits, PDF tutorials, gemstones, square and half round wire. So if you're interested in some materials, I'll pop a link into the description and you can pop over and see if there's anything that you fancy. I quite often run some specials, which I do at the moment as well. So yeah, that will be that. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.